and welcome to a special episode of Tom's Hit Parade. I like to think that they're all special in their own way, but, well, this one's a little more so. I was originally going to do my October backtracks this week, but it occurred to me several days ago that my sister, Kim, would have celebrated not just any birthday, but a milestone birthday this year, the kind that I would ordinarily mention on backtracks if she'd been a musician. She was actually a school teacher, by the way. So I decided it was time to do an episode in memory of her. I mean, you've heard me talk about her several times on this channel, so I figured maybe you'd like to know a little bit more about her too, and why I talk about her so much. Kim and I bonded over music, especially during the last 15 years or so of her life. I really, kind of obviously now, I wished it had been a lot longer than 15 years, but it was only a little over 20 years or so ago that I really got into music. So we were able to share that, and actually the last several years that she would come up to visit us from California 3 or 4 times a year, and the last several years there happened to be an artist that I liked, or an artist that she liked, or an artist that both of us liked, that happened to be doing a concert tour stop in the Eugene area during her visit. So we were able to go to several concerts together, which was a really nice icing on the cake, so to speak. Kim and I were actually 12 years apart in age, so our musical tastes didn't overlap all that much, but you know, there were like the artists like Elton John and Chicago and probably 2 or 3 others who had hits both in the 70s and the 80s that we were able to have a mutual interest in. You know, she grew up in the 70s, I grew up in the 80s. So, but nevertheless, despite our somewhat disparate musical tastes, I mean, we like the same kind of stuff, just, you know, obviously with the time difference. There was not a lot of overlap. Despite that, though, the only possession of hers that I really wanted after she had passed away was her CD collection. And it took a few years, but my brother-in-law finally delivered it to me back in 2015. My sister passed away in 2012. And so I spent the next 3 years getting to know my sister a little bit more by exploring the music that she loved. Now, in addition to the rock and pop stuff that she liked from, you know, back in the day, and more recently that she loved and enjoyed, I also discovered through exploring her CD collection that she'd also recently developed a fondness for vocal jazz, particularly female artists like Norah Jones and Diana Krall, which happen to be distinctive voices, and you know how much I like distinctive voices in music. I don't know if that was just a coincidence or if I'm kind of gleaned that off from her. In fact, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about in this episode, the genres and the artists, are stuff that I've kind of become fond of, partly or mostly because of Kim's listening habits. So yeah, my listening habits have been greatly affected by my sister in the last five or 6 years. But anyway, she also really appreciated a good electric guitar, like Carlos Santana. She absolutely loved Carlos Santana, and Jimi Hendrix. She really loved Hendrix. And also, one of her all-time favorites was Eric Clapton. Got the 4-disc Crossroads box set here. It's a little stained. The canvas book cut jacket is a little stained, but hey, this is definitely a keeper. And she also really, really loved and appreciated B.B. King, the blues master B.B. King, who I've talked about, obviously, in this podcast a couple of times. And of course, one of the items she really loved was the joint album they did together, B.B. King and Eric Clapton, Riding with the King, which I actually really enjoyed as well. Now, I would only be speculating as to who my sister's top 5 all-time favorite artists were, so I'm not even going to attempt that. I'm just going to talk about some of her favorite artists based on how many of their CDs she had in her collection. So I imagine these are going to be pretty good educated guesses. The first one I mentioned a few minutes ago was Diana Krall, jazz vocalist, just fantastic. My sister had 5 or 6 of her CDs in her collection, and I, over the last 8 months particularly, have basically collected the whole rest of her discography. I've really come to enjoy Diana Krall's voice. Another of her all-time favorite artists was, and she talked about them a lot, the Eagles. They were a 70s band, so she loved the Eagles, and she actually had almost all but one of Don Henley's CDs in her collection, and 1 or 2 Glenn Frey CDs. So I mean, she was definitely a huge Eagles fan. And another one that this is probably the artist that she had the most CDs of in her collection, is a jazz saxophonist by the name of Bonnie James. She had, I think, 9 of his CDs in her collection. I've kept them all. I've come to enjoy him. I'm not the hugest fan of jazz saxophone, but I like it. And yeah, I like him. He's got a good style. He's fun to listen to. Excellent background music, if nothing more. And one of her favorite bands was Steely Dan. She actually had 6 of their albums on CD. And I decided, oh, what the hell? They only had 9 albums in their discography, so I decided to pick up the other 3. So now I've got a full Steely Dan collection, thanks in large part to my sister. And these guys are a great band. If you've never tried them out, give them a try. They've got a bit of a jazz influence, but they made some great music back in the day. And another favorite artist of hers, probably a lesser favorite, but only because I didn't hear her talk about him so much, was Van Morrison. And same thing with him. With all the other ones on this list, I've developed an appreciation for him. I've really come to like his stuff. She had 4 or 5 of his CDs, and I've picked up 2 or 3 more in the last year or so. So, yeah, those were some of my sister's favorite artists. And now, I thought I'd talk a few minutes about some of my favorite albums from her collection. Now, I kept 375 or 380 of her CDs, hence the reason I needed, about a year ago, I needed some shelf space expansion. Was probably partly due to her CD collection. I didn't quite keep all of them. There were some that were just, some that I already had, probably 30 or 40 that I already had that were in her collection, so I got rid of those, and some that were just, I'm not sure what they were doing in here. I guess she might have bought them on impulse and just didn't care for them. I mean, I've certainly done that a few times. So yeah, I could name a lot more than 5 probably that I really enjoy out of her collection, but just for consistency's sake, I decided to make this video lists of 5, and hopefully for brevity also. I mean, I don't want to make this video 40 freaking minutes long. But anyway, one of the most surprising listens I got out of this whole odyssey of listening to my sister's music was Another Cup by Yusuf, formerly known as Cat Stevens. It's hard to describe the feeling I got listening to this album. It was kind of soothing, relaxing, in a way spiritually fulfilling, although I'm not a spiritual guy, by the way. And part of it has to do, I'm sure, with his voice, just because he's just still got that mellowness in his voice that he's had since the 70s. And yeah, another 70s artist. That's my sister for you. So, but yeah, if you have not listened to this album, I strongly encourage you to give it a listen. It's an excellent album. And then we have classic legendary jazz guitarist George Benson with his album Breezin'. Like a lot of the artists in this video and in my sister CD collection in general, I have listened to more and more of them after listening to the albums that my sister left me. Great album, by the way. Great guitarist George Benson. And then we have Take It a Long Way by the Dixie Chicks. This was the album that won them the Grammy for Album of the Year. And one thing that my sister liked, I noticed, was female artists that had a lot of attitude and spunk. And the Dixie Chicks definitely had that. I mean, this featured their kiss-off song to their disgruntled fans and detractors alike, not ready to make nice after their little criticism of George W. Bush. But yet it also has a song called Easy Silence, which I actually got to know from Dan Wilson's solo album. He was frontman for Semisonic, and he actually wrote this song. I think he wrote it first for the Dixie Chicks, in fact. But yeah, this is a great album, a fantastic album. And then a couple of compilations. This one, Mary Had a Little Amp. And being a school teacher, my sister loved children's music. She taught the lower grades. Kids, 8 and under, mostly. And this is an album of nursery rhymes and other kids' songs performed by contemporary artists. When I put this album on, I mean, I was expecting to enjoy it, but this album was so my sister, it was so Kim, that for a while I could actually feel her sitting beside me as I was listening to it, and it almost brought tears to my eyes. Just, yeah, if I had to pick a favorite out of the entire collection of hers, this would be it, probably. But yeah, Maroon 5, R.E.M., the Dixie Chicks, Madonna, Bonnie Raitt. She also liked Bonnie Raitt. Brian Wilson, Indigo Girls, Roseanne Cash. I mean, this is a great album. Seek it out if you might be into that sort of thing. And also, my sister loved The Muppet Show when she was younger, and I think she loved it just as much in her adulthood. And this is the 25th anniversary collection, Music, Mayhem, and More. She loved the Rainbow Connection. That was one of her favorite songs, actually, and it is covered by the Dixie Chicks on this Mary Had a Little Lamp. Mana Mana, she loved that song. That was one of her favorites as well. So, but yeah, this album is definitely my sister as well. She loved it, and believe me, it would be easy to not stop the list at 5 to keep it going. Like, for instance, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, self-titled album, fantastic. I really enjoyed that one. Willie Nelson's Stardust, another one of my favorites. That kind of got me onto a Willie Nelson kick. Like a lot of the other artists, like I said. Nora Jones' first album, I mentioned her, she really loved Nora Jones. And also Jerry Orbach. My sister was a huge fan of the TV show Law & Order. And Jerry Orbach played Detective Lenny Briscoe on Law & Order. And he was a Broadway star and actually was a really good singer. And leave it to my sister to find a Jerry Orbach CD. So, yeah, this definitely instantly brings to mind my sister whenever I look at it. And which brings us into the next category I thought I would mention real quick, is albums of my own that remind me of my sister. These are albums, as I said, that I actually own, but they strongly evoke feelings of my sister whenever I look at them or play them or whatnot. The first one is No Boundaries by the Five Browns. Now, if you're not familiar with them, they are a quintet of classical piano playing siblings. Extremely talented. They were on a concert tour. Their tour stop coincided with my sister being in town, so I got us tickets and she and I went there. Now, classical music is not really her thing, but she really enjoyed the concert. She loved it. They were, as I said, they're extremely talented. Check them out if you haven't yet, and if you don't mind classical music. And they were actually had a little meet and greet at the end, so as you can see, I got the CD booklet autographed by all 5 of them. They were very personable, very polite, very nice, and as I mentioned, very talented. So yeah. And Continuum by John Mayer. Now, one year when my sister was visiting us, John Mayer and Sheryl Crow were on tour together, and they were at a stop up in Portland, so it was a bit of a drive for us, but we went there, and my sister loved both of them, Sheryl Crow and John Mayer, and I was somewhat of a fan, not as big a fan as she was, but I thoroughly enjoyed the show. It made me appreciate what a wicked guitarist John Mayer is. I mean, honestly, he gets a lot of flack now. He's maybe in some ways gone a little over the edge, but honestly, I love his glory days. I've got, his first 4 albums, I think. So yeah, he's got talent. You cannot deny that he's got talent. This next one on this list is a bit of an unusual one. It is Electric Touch, is the name of the band, and the album is called Never Look Back. Now, my sister actually never listened to this album. The reason it's on the list is because I picked it up during one of her last visits with us. This was actually an album from 2012. Every time my sister was visiting us, she and I would take a day to spend together, going out. We would usually go to one of the local record stores, or maybe both, and also go to Red Robin for lunch. Well, Red Robin is one of my favorite places to eat. And so yeah, that was I bought it when my sister was with me, so that's the reason why this is so. And it's a good band too. Give it a listen. And another band that my sister and I went to a concert together with was Chicago. As I mentioned them at the beginning of this episode. It was an amphitheater, an open-air amphitheater during the summer. It was kind of like, picnic-style seating. You lay out a blanket, bring a couple lawn chairs if you want to, and sit down there. Just sit out wherever you want, and we had an absolute blast. My sister spent most of the concert on her feet dancing to the music. She absolutely loved it. And yeah, we all had such a great time with Chicago. But yeah, this is their 2-disc greatest hits, the very best of Only the Beginning. And they're a good band with a great discography of hit singles, so check them out if you haven't yet. And now the last one on this list is, it's kind of bittersweet. It's definitely the most meaningful one to me on this list. It is Play by Brad Paisley. Now, my sister had started developing a fondness for Brad Paisley in her last few years, and that kind of rubbed off on me, as most of her tastes were doing at that point. She was going in for brain surgery, actually, and we decided we'd put together a little care package for her, and it was my idea to pick up this CD for a few reasons, which I'll explain in a few minutes. And unfortunately, one thing led to another, and we never got the chance to send her the care package before she had passed away. And so that is why this CD is so meaningful to me, is because I absolutely know, without a doubt, she would have loved listening to this. It is a mostly instrumental album, and it had an appearance by B.B. King on it, which, I mean, as I said, she loved B.B. King, and she loved great guitar work, electric guitar work, and this obviously very much was a showcase for his electric guitar. And one of the songs on here was named Kim, which definitely, gives it a little extra meaning. But yeah, I mean, I honestly, on the day that we found out she was not going to make it, I put it on my CD player and listened to it, and I wasn't actually crying. I was smiling the entire time because I know how much she would have absolutely loved this album. So yeah, this is a very special album to me, and I'm sure it would have been a special album to her as well. Now, the last list of 5 that I thought I would present to you today are albums that I think my sister would have liked. Some of them were released before my sister passed away, but some of them were not. But in all cases, I am pretty darn certain that they're albums that she would have absolutely loved. The first one is called Love is the Answer, and it's by Barbra Streisand. Now, my sister liked Barbra Streisand. I don't know that she was a huge fan, but my mother was, so they would have had that connection, Barbra Streisand connection. They would have loved that. But the thing that I think would have sold my sister on this was that it was produced and featured piano by Diana Krall. And you know how much my sister loved Diana Krall, so yeah, I think more than anything, the Diana Krall connection would have sold my sister on this. But it's just, even on its own merits, it's an excellent album. You can't deny Barbra Streisand's talent, honestly. The next one is called Let the Good Times Roll. It is by B.B. King. And we all know how much my sister loved B.B. King, but she also liked Louis Jordan, the classic jazz blues guitarist. And this is a tribute to Louis Jordan. It is just packed from front to back with fantastic renditions of classic Louis Jordan hits. Yeah, my sister would have absolutely, totally loved this album. And these next 3 are albums that came out after she passed away. First one is a young jazz guitarist named Andreas Verratti. His guitar playing, he was inspired a lot by George Benson, and so that's, the guitar work on here reminds me a lot of George Benson, so my sister would have loved that. But another thing that she would have liked was it has a Steely Dan cover on here. Do It Again is track 1, actually. So I think all that put together, and just the sound of the album in general, I think my sister would have really loved that one. And I mentioned before how she liked country music, and she also liked artists with some spunk and some attitude. So I think she really would have enjoyed Casey Musgraves. This is Casey's first album, Same Trailer, Different Park. It's just a great album with some unconventional lyrics, and just, you're probably familiar enough with Casey Musgraves to know that about her. But yeah, my sister, I think, would have really been a fan of Casey Musgraves. Fantastic. And the latest addition to this, as soon as I heard it was announced, I knew that this is an album I could just see my sister absolutely loving this album from top to bottom. It is the recent collaboration between Tony Bennett and Diana Krall, Love Is Here to Stay. There's just not much more you can say about it. I mean, this album just, it just sells itself practically, right here. This is all you need to know about it. It is a fantastic album, by the way. And yeah, my sister would have absolutely, totally adored it. So yeah, as you can tell, and as I've mentioned several times, my listening habits over the last few years have definitely been greatly influenced by my sister Kim. You heard me mention in Backtracks recently, or you saw me shout this out, the Willie Nelson and Wynton Marsalis duet album, which I really enjoyed. This was in my sister's collection, and that, along with Stardust, has sent me on a bit of a Willie Nelson kick lately. I mean, I've got actually 3 Willie Nelson albums lately that I actually have not gotten to listen to yet. I've got one, Let's Face the Music and Dance, that's Willie Nelson Family. Another one, Willie Nelson and Wynton Marsalis again, featuring Norah Jones. Here we go again. It promises to be excellent. I just haven't gotten to listen to it yet. And another live duets album with a star-studded assortment. Ray Charles, Norah Jones, Eric Clapton, Elvis Costello, Shania Twain, Paul Simon, Steven Tyler, John Mellencamp. I mean, you ought to be running out and buying this right now, honestly. But yeah, and there are several artists that I've gotten into more, thanks to my sister. Boz Scaggs, I really started to enjoy his stuff. Sheryl Crow, I've pretty much completed my discography of Sheryl Crow. My sister had 3 or 4 Sheryl Crow albums, and I bought 3 or 4 more. And Sarah McLachlan, I was actually, this is another artist I was pleasantly surprised by, was Sarah McLachlan. She was more pop rock than I expected her to be, closer to Sheryl Crow maybe than, I mean, I always pictured her as being more of a Celine Dion, more of a snoozy diva pop kind of stuff, but she actually had a little more rock and more attitude in her stuff, so I was pleasantly surprised by her. And also the Brian Setzer Orchestra, my sister had 2 or 3 of their albums, and they've only had 4 or 5 albums, so I had to complete their collection. I mean, since they're that close, why not, right? So, but yeah, oh, and this is one of my most meaningful pieces of my collection here. My sister, as I mentioned, was a 70s kid, so she had probably half the volumes of super hits of the 70s, Have a Nice Day, in her collection, and so of course, you know, I mean, I'll collect CDs at the drop of a hat, so I had to go on and collect the entire rest of the set. So yeah, this is the entire set of super hits of the 70s. This is, yeah, and it's got that much more meaning to me because my sister collected half of it and I collected the other half. So yeah, that is probably, as I said, the most meaningful item in my collection, probably, when it comes to my connection with my sister Kim. So, well, that's it, I think. I hope you really enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it and sharing with you my fond memories of my sister and our bond over music. I'm fortunate enough to come from one of those families that's very light on dysfunction, and as such I have really nothing but fond memories of my sister. And we got into the habit a long time ago of saying I love you to each other whenever we parted ways, and the last time we saw each other was no exception, which is all the more important because we didn't realize it was going to be the last time we saw each other. And you know, that's another thing, is if you're having a difference of opinion, especially something that's kind of minor in the grand scheme, with a sibling of yours, you know, try and do something, you know, reach out and try and bridge the gulf. Even if it's just saying, I appreciate you having you in my life, and maybe even I love you, because you never know when it's going to be the last time you see them or talk to them. So that's my advice. Take it as you will. But yeah, my sister was loved and appreciated by so many people. She had a great sense of humor. She would call and leave silly birthday songs on our phone answering machine, 4 or 5 different messages, of course, every time one of us had a birthday. So yeah, that was just one of the fun things I remember about her. And so yeah, the reason I love her so much is, and have so many fond memories, is one of the reasons why it's very difficult for me to cry when I think about her. I tend to just smile because it just, as I said, there's just so many fond memories. I'm very fortunate in that regard. Don't get me wrong. I'm very thankful and grateful. So, but anyway, I could go on and on. Thank you very much for watching. As I said, comments on anything in this video, the artist I mentioned, musical bonds that you share with a sibling of yours, drop a comment, please. And if you have not subscribed yet, please subscribe. I would very much appreciate it. And again, thank you very much for watching, and as my relationship with my sister has taught me, life's too short to be a music snob.